which is west of Riverfront Parkway and between Riverfront Parkway and the Tennessee River, and looking to completely reshape it into commercial, retail, recreation, residential, and hotel uses. They would also include some acreage for park space on the riverfront, as well as potentially enhancing the riverfront presence with the marina. There is currently zero housing at the Bend because this is obviously a former industrial site. So as of right now, there's nothing on the site, but they are planning for over 1,000 units of multifamily housing. 10% of those rental housing units would be designated as affordable to families at 80% AMI or below, with a cash penalty in the event that there are developers that are not able to provide, for whatever reason, that they are not able to provide or meet that affordable housing threshold. They are subject to then pay a cash penalty to the city of Chattanooga, which then goes into the city's affordable housing fund. And then the units would be reserved as affordable for 10 years. Some additional community benefits that were part of this deal were the utilization of DBEs in terms of contracts for some of the construction, as well as a commitment to make sure that any office buildings were environmentally sustainable, a dedication of park space and public infrastructure to the city, and then the developer would also commit to looking at ways to basically create assessments for future property owners over there to help maintain the cost of some of the infrastructure, as well as create multimodal connectivity improvements. So I don't want to steal too much of their thunder, so I'll allow Mr. Jimmy White to come up to say a few words about Urban Story Ventures in a second. But I will say that, just as a reminder, this project was extremely important to both the city and the county, not only because of just the tremendous potential for redevelopment of a former industrial site that's currently vacant, but also because this was the first time that we created a TIF in which we were taking part of the increment to use it to fund another revitalization project called Westside Evolves, which is the revitalization of College Hill Courts and Gateway Tower on Chattanooga Housing Authority property. And Betsy McWright is here from the Chattanooga Housing Authority as well. And then there is also a portion of funding that is also being used to go into the creation of a new education facility that would be owned and maintained by Hamilton County government and Hamilton County schools. And so this is a huge project with many moving parts, and we are happy to be bringing it sort of to the finish line today, and hoping for a groundbreaking in the next few weeks to kick off development. But Jimmy, you have anything you want to add?
Sure. Jimmy White, President of Urban Story Ventures, owner developer of the Bend. Happy to answer any questions. I think we've been through this process before, so I think many of you are familiar with the Bend, and we're just like to add that we're anxiously awaiting to get started. So with that being said, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Can you, and I'm so sorry if you need to restate this, what is the timeline for the sort of, it sounds like you're getting ready to break ground as soon as we're out of your way, but what's the timeline for the various phases?
Yes, sir, 16 days, but who's counting?
And then what happens after that?
So initially, we're breaking ground on the north side of the phase, which would be the MLK corridor. Again, we've got roughly 120 acres, 3,000 linear feet of riverfront. We're connecting, we've always said bring the riverfront to the city and the city back to the riverfront. So MLK is the first portion of that. We have 1,018 beds touching that side of the site. You'll see some multifamily there, grocery anchored opportunities as well. So, and then following that, we'll shift our focus to the Main Street corridor on the other end of the site. So,
Questions from fellow board members? Okay. Jermaine, do you mind to restate exactly what we're voting on this afternoon?
Yes. So so as part of the TIF process, there comes a point at the end of the process in which there is a development and financing agreement that basically governs how the flow of tax increment will, how the tax increment will flow, and to what bodies the the tax increment will flow to. The development agreement also basically provides a roadmap to the Industrial Development Board to describe how the development will happen, and if there are any commitments that are expected, any commitments or obligations that are expected of the developer, we try to capture most of that within the development agreement. And so that is essentially what you are voting on today. And so for those of you who were on the board when we did the North Access Road TIF that created the new industrial site around the former DuPont facility, you also voted on a development and financing agreement that came before you towards the end of that TIF process. We did the same thing several years ago for the TIF that we did for the MLK extension. And so this is part of the TIF process. It's kind of the last sort of step. And so all of the things, all of these community benefits that you see on the screen have been addressed in the development agreement per the presentations that we've made to the IDB and to our legislative bodies. And so this is really just sort of the final step. And then after that, they then have the ability to go and break ground and go forth and conquer. And so we want to see them do well. And then just as a reminder, a portion of the increment that's generated from this development also is then used to fund infrastructure improvements for the Chattanooga Housing Authority as part of their West Side Evolves plan. A portion of the increment will be used to go to Hamilton County to help them with their new education facility that they want to do on the Gateway site. And then a portion of increment will also be used by the city to hopefully build a new fire station. And so these are all things that are important to us. And then I think that's about it. Mark, did I miss anything?
Sorry, I'm probably want to just get out of here, but I think a couple of things is this is the first development agreement under your new tax increment financing policies that were approved by the city and this board. And so we've tried to incorporate everything from that in there. This is an interesting development agreement because it's primarily focused on public infrastructure. I mean, it doesn't mandate that they build certain buildings. It's really to cause the redevelopment of the Bend area. So it's a phase-by-phase approach. And so the first phase is the north phase, roughly a 4-block phase, where they are agreeing that they shall build the public infrastructure and commence redevelopment of that site. The next 2 phases are contingent upon financing and demand. So we envision the south side being next, or they do, and then the middle being the last part. And it's a 3, 4, 5 year look out to do those. But I know there's been a lot of questions from TIFs in the past. Okay, what did they really commit to do? I want to make sure you understand they're committing to build public infrastructure and they're committing to donate some very valuable property for parks and green space, including no matter what happens, some very valuable property directly on the river that my experience is riverfront property like that is whenever you can get it, you should try for the community. And so this is a great benefit in my judgment of this agreement. It's a complicated agreement. We're seeing more and more of these across the strait for multi-use development. I would like to tell you it's perfect. If I ever draft the perfect agreement, I'm going to quit. But it has a lot of working things, and I'm sure, I'd like to tell you we'll never be in front of you again, but I'm sure there'll be adjustments to make you made. But I do think this provides a really good framework for them to be able to move forward with the first phase of their development.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, because it's all percentages, and because I've seen some numbers, and I think the numbers have changed. When we're saying 10% of units affordable with households with 80% or less of AMI, what is that now? I mean, I'm guessing it's changed over time, and it may change over time.
Yeah, I'll have to double check with you to see what the actual income threshold is at this moment in time, and I can follow up with you for that. But
I guess a more important question is, what is
Yeah.
considered affordable for 80% or less of AMI? Like, what is the standard that is included in the agreement for?
wait,
Is like a certain percentage of that income for people who qualify that have, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what is
yeah,
the?
so it would be similar to sort of the way that we do pilots, in that as a developer builds, say, a multifamily building, they have to reserve a certain percentage of the units for families at 80% AMI or below, which is an income verified. And so the family or the occupant of the unit then has to show proof of eligibility by showing proof that their income falls below whatever that certain threshold is. And so we've typically on pilot agreements, it's usually sort of a 20% set aside, or that's the way it was in the past for some of our downtown development. As time went on, some of our pilot agreements expanded to become 50% of units had to be affordable to people at certain income thresholds. The city is now in the process of doing an overhaul on the pilot program as we speak, to allow the thresholds to be more flexible so that local developers can also, qualify and be able to utilize the pilot, because in recent years, we have not seen as much utilization of it. But it will be based on income you will have to verify your income in order to show.
That I understand. I guess my question is who defines what affordable is? For example,
HUD.
okay, so
Yeah.
they set the price on what
Correct.
that would.
Yeah,
okay.
so our housing, our division of housing and community investment will base those thresholds on HUD guidelines. And so whatever the HUD guidelines are at that given point in time for what is considered 80% of AMI, that's what they'll go with.
I guess I have some questions, and this may be a discussion for later time, but I know for a fact that there were pilot programs that were doing like $1,200 for a 600 square foot, one bed, one bath in downtown Chattanooga. So that if that was 7 or 8 years ago, that question now of like, if we approve these, what is affordable, who's setting what the rate is? I get the income verification, that's kind of
Yeah.
general, that I don't have as much of a problem with, but just wondering, because it's kind of a little bit nebulous on like
Yeah.
what that actually looks like. And so if it's adjusted for inflation, things like that, and now it's $1,500 for a one bedroom in downtown Chattanooga, and that's not even exactly downtown, it's off a
Sure.
little bit. I just wonder how affordable that would be for,
Sure.
and really who can use that? Are we talking about single people from outside, from Nashville? That's super affordable.
Yeah.
Versus for Chattanooga.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that as a city, it is important for us to understand that we are in a cycle where rents are higher than ever. And so our market rate rent is higher than ever. So that means that our corresponding thresholds are also going to skew higher because rents are higher than ever. But what we as a city have to do is we have to sort of determine what those thresholds are based on HUD guidelines. And that's really what we have always used as the standard for determining what the AMI thresholds are, whatever the market rate is for current rents. But rents are high these days, as well as, housing prices in general on mortgages. And so that is unfortunately the nature of the housing market that we find ourselves in.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Any further questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and read the caption, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Industrial Development Board of the City of Chattanooga authorizing the execution of a development and tax incentive agreement relating to the Bend Development Project. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Thank you very much. We come to other business discussion items, update on pilot policies and procedures progress.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we continue to push through on, obviously, we've been pretty busy with some big projects here recently. And so as we continue to make progress on both the stadium and the Bend, we now feel like we've got a little bit more breathing room to address some of our pilot policies. And so I anticipate that we will have a draft pilot policy to bring before this board for our next meeting. And so work will start diligently on our part to make sure that you all have a pilot policy that you see before the next meeting that you can read through and then ask us plenty of questions in preparation for the next meeting.
And speaking of which, thank you, Jermaine. Recognizing this meeting happened out of sequence, and I do appreciate everybody's being here on an unusual day. We've decided, I think, we don't need a meeting in April. What would the next meeting date be? May?
There was text for a special meeting. for next month.
There was, I'm so sorry. Okay, what date will that be?
It would be either the second Monday or the fourth Monday.
Okay. I might need to query our members offline and see if who's available for a quorum. But would that be the date by which we would have something to consider?
We had not, we were not aware of this, the request for the special meeting.
Yeah.
So it would be easy, if the special meeting were the fourth Monday of April, we could probably have our pilot policies.
Why don't we assume we're having a meeting in May, and if you can have something,
Okay.
I'd rather you guys take your time and make sure we've got something thoughtful that we have plenty of time to look at. Is that
Okay.
fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business for this board that we need to discuss, or anyone has questions on? Well, thank you for being here and for getting a lot of business done today. I appreciate it very much. I will hear a motion to adjourn if nothing else. Move. Can you stand it?